So hello and welcome to another of the interviews that the channel seems to be becoming very popular for. Today we've got something slightly different. We've got Andreas Lundstrom. Hopefully I pronounced that right. It's never good when you try to do cross culture. Who is a big gamer in Sweden and has also written the soundtrack for the Twilight 2000 role-playing game, of which I've actually I'll put a link up in the top corner to the review I did. So I'm going to say it's good afternoon for you and good morning for me, I believe.
Yeah, just past lunchtime here in Sweden.
Didn't think that one through. We should have done that one so we're both on the same. But hey, we've got that. So welcome to the interview.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure listening to the soundtrack that you did for Twilight 2000. What I'd like to do is sort of talk a little bit about your gaming side of things first, and then move on to the sort of the musical side. Now, can I ask how did you get involved in gaming?
Well, I first heard about role-playing games in the 80s when some friends of mine had a D&D and a D&D second edition game going on. And I like, flipped through the books and I was like, this is awesome. When can I join? And they were like, you can't play. You can't play. They were really like, gatekeeping, like you're a beginner. You can't play this. It's too advanced for you. And then I read Lord of the Rings and fell in love with that and became a huge Tolkien nerd. And my feeling of exclusion grew, and I was like, and then I started what we call gymnasiet here in Sweden. I think that would be called high school in the States.
Yeah.
When you are like 16 years of age. And I got some new friends, and they were much more inclusive, and they let me join their gaming group. And we mostly played the big Swedish game called Drakar och Demoner, which I think through, among others, Free League have gotten some attention internationally as well, because back in the 80s, that was actually one of the best-selling games in the world. And consider now, this was a game that was only sold in Sweden with a population back then of about 6 or 7 million. And it was only sold in Swedish, and one of the best-selling RPGs in the world.
That's pretty impressive. Although I believe Sweden has got a very strong role-playing community, hasn't it?
Yeah, we really do, and I think we are the biggest RPG nation per capita, both when you count the number of players, publishers, games sold, and stuff like that. I do believe so, because it's really huge here, and it's been huge. Of course, we had the decline during the first decade of the 2000s, like everyone else, but we have also entered this new like golden age of recent years in RPGs. So yeah, but this was 94 when I started playing Drakar and Demoner, and then we were going to play the Swedish translation of MERP, Middle Earth Role-Playing Games.
Yeah.
And the game master at the time, he was tired of me correcting him with the lore, because I was deep into Tolkien lore by then. So he said, okay, that's it. You're game mastering this game. I want to be a player as well, because he was somewhat of a forever GM. So yeah, he wanted me to take over GMing, and I had only been playing for a few months, and these guys had been playing for 5-7 years. I was super daunted, but I threw myself into it, and since then I've been a player and a game master, dungeon master. And I had a short hiatus, I think it was at least 10 years, which would be approximately from 2005 to 2015, more or less. But from then on, I've been gaming a lot these past 5-6 years.
Yeah, that sounds quite a common pattern. A lot of people do seem to drop out and come back into the hobby.
Yeah, for me it was kids who were the big blockers.
Yeah, real life keeps getting in the way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But now they're a bit bigger, so now I can indulge in my hobby and my love and my passion once again.
Yeah. So do you get to game often, or?
Yeah, quite a lot. I have a podcast and a live stream. We play regularly, and then I have a few home games. Most of the home games have had a pause during the pandemic because most of them, or all of them, I should say, uh, don't feel like playing online. They want IRL. Uh, they want to meet physically around the table to play. So yeah, I have a few home games that have paused during the pandemic. Hopefully, we'll all be vaccinated soon and we can start playing again in a few months, maybe.
Yeah, I know it's very liberating at this end when we've started to be able to game again face to face. Because you are
Mm,
right, it is a different experience gaming online as
mm,
opposed to gaming
mm,
face to face. So,
mm.
what are your favourite games then?
It's this one right here. Where is it? The One Ring. The One Ring is my all-time favorite RPG. It's such an amazing game, and for me as a Tolkien nerd, it just hits all the buttons, and I really love it. As you see, I have a complete collection of the first edition, all the dice, all the supplements, everything. I even have a few duplicates as well. But yeah, it's really a favorite game of mine. I love everything about it, and I do think it's a very good system, even if you take the Tolkien part aside. Although it's an extremely thematic game, of course. I mean, every rule they have tried to think, would this fit in the books? What would this be in the book? So if they add a skill, they need to find that skill in the books. They have searched to, and they have a quote for every skill um, from the books where it says, Boromir blew the horn of Gondor and all the enemies fled, or whatever. If you want to roll for awe, for instance. So every skill they found quotes for in the book to show the players this is what the skill is for. This is what you do with the skill. The same with traits and distinctive features and stuff like that. So it's really, but even if you take that aside, it's a great game. It's a great system where you have because Francesco Nepitello is such a great game designer, and of course Marco Maggi and the rest of his team as well. It's not just Francesco, but they've been doing this for a long time, and they've really created a system where um, you have little things coming into it where you can tweak, or you can do some small adjustments to fit the situation. It's really good.
Yeah, that that sort of appeals to most gamers, I think, doesn't it? Because we're not a gamer unless we tweak the rules somewhere.
Mm, Yeah, exactly. I don't think I've ever played a game where I have had zero home rules. Um,
That sounds about right. So, obviously, you've been involved with the Twilight 2000. Have you actually had much of a chance to look at the Twilight 2000 material?
Actually, not much, because as many other who work in the RPG community, uh, you get a project and you work like a lot with that project, and then when it's done, you move on. And in my case, I was actually finished with the soundtrack on a very early stage. So what I have been seeing is more like early drafts and maybe a bit of the alpha, maybe. But I haven't even had time to look at the beta, because when the beta was finished, that was months after I was even finished with the soundtracks. And then I have new projects. I mean, I wish I would have time to read every game thoroughly that I have in my shelf. This is just a small chunk of it behind me here, but it's, I mean, 4 kids, a podcast, a live stream, and all the freelance work as a musician and composer. It's once the game is printed, I will definitely look through it more thoroughly, and I will probably try a game or two with my home group for sure.
I think a lot of people don't realise the sheer lead time it takes to pull everything together for a project like that, and the fact that you want to have everything ready all at the same time. Logistically, it's an absolute nightmare. So, it's one of the few games I think where I've actually seen the soundtrack come out actually before the printed copies got out, which is quite nice. Hint, Free I'm
Yeah,
still,
because
we're
I
still
wanted the
waiting.
soundtrack to be available for streamers and podcasts, and they often like jump the gun as soon as there's a beta. They're like, "Oh yeah, check out our live stream, check out our podcast."
Yeah.
So I wanted the soundtrack to be finished in time for them to use that before they can move on to other music. You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you see music and role-playing games linking together?
For me, I've had a passion for, of course, as a musician and as someone who's very musically interested, and I also have a passion for movie soundtracks. Um, I'd say, yeah, probably more than half of all the music I listen to is movie soundtracks. So it's really something. It's really a big passion for me, and so therefore, when I've been playing, like even before my hiatus back in the late 90s, I compiled playlists for my campaigns and for campaigns where I was a player as well, and I had like files titled Inn or Tavern, and one Cave, Sneaky, Battle, After the Battle, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I was so zealous about it. I was like, I even checked the volume so that the volume at the end of each song would fit the volume at the start of the next song, because volumes can differ a lot when it comes to movie soundtracks. And also for me it's important, and that's something that I think people will like and dislike about my scores for role-playing games, because it should be ambient music. It should be in there in the background. It should never take precedence over the game, over the dialogue. Uh, I actually, this was the first time I included an overture
Yeah.
for the Twilight 2000, because I wanted something that you could put on while you unpack your dice, while you fix the table, while you take up your character sheet, you chat with the GM about, oh yeah, I had some points here. I wanted to raise a skill or something. So I wanted something to boost the sense of, like, we're gonna do something awesome now. We've met, we're meeting here together, and we're gonna do something epic together. So I wanted an overture, but apart from that, I want all the pieces to be very ambient, and they should not differ in volume. They should not differ in dynamic and stuff like that, because as soon as it does that, people around the table will like, oh, what was that? And I don't want the GM to be a DJ. I want the GM to, okay, we have a scene here. This song would fit. So we put that on a loop. So it just loops the same song over and over again. And then the game master can just don't think about the music anymore. The worst thing I've been experiencing is when a GM was just fiddling with the volume all the time, because there was a new song and it was too loud. He had to lower the volume. And then there was a new song. It was too low. He had to raise the volume. And this broke the flow of the game. So I really want the music for an RPG to be ambient, to be on the same level when it comes to dynamics and volume. And I wanted to add some feelings, some emotions to the scene, but never to take precedence over the dialogue and what's happening at the table. That's my very, very firm philosophy, and everyone doesn't have to agree, but that's my philosophy, and that's how I make my music for RPGs. So it's not meant to be put on your stereo or your headphones and be like, okay, I'm going to listen to this song now. You can, of course, do that, but that's not its purpose. So if someone finds it monotone or boring, that's what it's supposed to be.
I forget who said it. It was somebody much cleverer than me said, he was talking about film music. They said, if you notice the music in a film, I've done it wrong.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think it might have been John Williams. I'm not sure, but I think
could well be a
I
John
recognize
Williams.
a quote. I recognize the quote, or maybe it was Danny Elfman. I'm not sure, but yeah, I recognize the quote, and I thoroughly agree. Although when it comes to film music, I do think that the leitmotifs, a theme song for a certain character or a certain thing, is extremely potent, and you should use it in a movie. And if people don't recognize it, then you've done it wrong.
Yeah, no,
So I do feel
that makes sense.
The quote is correct, but not when it comes to every aspect of film music, because some movie music, some leitmotifs are there to make you feel something as soon as you see a character, or as soon as a certain character does something epic, or
Yeah, no, that makes an awful lot of sense there. So can I just ask, how did you get involved with the Twilight 2000 soundtrack?
I had done 2 previous scores or soundtracks for Free League Publishing, one for Bitter Reach and one for Vasen. And when I heard about the Kickstarter, I just asked them, sounds like a good game for a soundtrack, doesn't it? And they're like, yeah, sure, yeah. We're super happy with your previous work, so it's of course you should do it. And yeah, that's that. And so maybe the question should be, how did I get involved with making soundtracks for the Free League, at all?
That was my follow-up question. So how did you get involved with Free League in the beginning?
I've been involved since I have a podcast called Sweden Rolls, where we play predominantly Swedish games published in English. So, of course, most of the English language, like most of the translated Swedish games, are by Free League Publishing. There are only a few others. There's like Cult Divinity Lost, there is Trudvang Chronicles, and we have Western 4th edition coming up from Oskfogen, Thunderbird, a great Western game, by the way, but the Kickstarter is unfortunately super late, even though I helped a bit with the translation. But most of them are Free League games. So I had been in touch with Free League a lot previously, especially when it comes to Forbidden Lands down here. We got super early access to that game to start, because that's our main campaign in my Sweden Rolls podcast. And they knew that I made a lot of original music for my podcast. And I actually got a question super fast from Nils at Free League, like, oh, we're gonna release a supplement for Forbidden Lands called Bitter Reach. Do you want to do the soundtrack? I need an answer super fast. So we had the world's fastest negotiation, and then I got the go, and then they added a stretch goal, and then that was that. I had done one RPG soundtrack before that as well, which was the Eluso publisher in Sweden, who got the license from Kelsim to make a Call of Cthulhu translation. And because Swedes are very, very proficient in English, so many people were like, why are you making a translation of Call of Cthulhu? Why? I mean, people play Call of Cthulhu a lot here, in English. So what they did was bring in a lot of big names in the Swedish RPG community to create a Swedish setting in the 1920s for Call of Cthulhu. So the Kickstarter went really well, and they got in touch with me quite early, because they knew that they wanted a soundtrack for Call of Cthulhu. And unfortunately, I did not have a budget to record a lot of swing music, and there's never enough budget in an RPG to record much acoustically. I have to do it on the computer with plugins and that kind of stuff. So I told them that the soundtrack would be more like ambient, scary music than music that you can pinpoint to the 1920s. So yeah, so that's how I got involved. Sorry, I'm a man of long answers. I apologize.
No, let's be honest. If people are tuning into my channel, they want to hear the people I'm talking to, not me rabbiting on about things. So it works nicely from my perspective. So when you came to the Twilight 2000 soundtrack, now
Hmm?
I'm interested in the influences that you had in it, because I'm sure I detected a few of them, which I referred to in the review.
You hit a
I,
home run, actually. Yeah.
well, like you, I'm a big lover of film music, and I mean, I detected Basil Polidoris in that, particularly for the travel music Conan soundtrack. That was a lovely little echo, and I quite liked that one. So, what big influences did you have for the Twilight 2000 soundtrack? And perhaps once you
Yeah.
answered that,
When I,
broader as well.
when I started working on it, I asked the community as well on Facebook, like, what would you like to have? What would you like it to include? And I got so many different answers. One wanted a full score of heavy metal music only, and one wanted computer music from the 70s, one wanted computer music from the 80s, one wanted house music from the 90s, and a lot of other stuff. So of course I knew from the get-go I'm not going to make everyone happy. Um, and for me, of course, as a freelancer, it's important to make my customer happy, which is a free league. So I had a lot of discussions with Thomas Herenstam, who's the lead designer of the game, and yeah, he definitely wanted some oh, the term escapes me completely, some synthesizers, and I instantly ask him, okay, because then I need to know, are we talking 80s or 90s? Because the synthesizers from the 80s and 90s sound completely different. And we were both more into it's having more of an 80s sound. And so I listen a lot to the Terminator soundtrack for Terminator 1. And of course, as you said, the music for the Conan movies by Basil Polidoris is one of my all-time favorites. So that's something I bear with me all the time. And so those are the main influences. I'm at the moment super into the Mandalorian soundtrack by a Swede, actually, Ludwig Göransson, which is an excellent soundtrack. It's a good example of someone who got um, the responsibility of shouldering the work of John Williams, but doing something different. And it's very risky because he has been criticized for people like, oh, this isn't Star Wars music. But I've never heard almost a soundtrack that more fits the setting than Ludwig's music for The Mandalorian.
I think people forget
It's
the
really good.
Mandalorian isn't mainstream Star Wars. It perhaps needs that different music.
Yeah, exactly, and it should be different, and it I love the soundtrack so much. There wasn't much for me to use from that. There wasn't much that I could pull from that, more than maybe a drum beat here and there, and just the sense of, because what I always want to do is I want the soundtracks or the scores to fit the setting. Of course, it sounds very obvious, but it is harder than you think. So for Vasen, that's the only time so far that I've used some solo acoustically recorded instrument, because you need some vev lira, a hurdy-gurdy, and you need some fiddle if you want to get to that really down to the roots of Nordic, Swedish music. Then you gotta have a fiddle, and you can't get that sound from a computer. So I have a fiddle maestro, actually an Italian guy, David Lombardi, a good friend of mine, who's a complete folk music maestro, and he studied Swedish folk music here in Stockholm. And I asked him to do two songs together with me, and I'm super happy with the result, because you really need the soundtrack to fit the setting. Otherwise, people won't use it. If I just make some generic music for role-playing games, I don't think. I mean, I might reach a broader audience, but the ones playing that game might not use it. So I really wanted, and so I and there is actually one more influence that I got very late in the process. So there's not much in there, but I actually love the soundtrack for the movie Fury, the one where Brad Pitt
Yeah.
and Shia LaBeouf and the guys play a tank squad in World War II. Because there was something about that movie that struck a chord with me, and you know, and the music for it is very dark and very good. So that was also an influence.
No, it's quite interesting what you're hearing your influences with that. I'll have to go back and listen to the Fury soundtrack. It'll be a good thing to do this week, actually, because this weekend I'm actually down at Bovington, where they actually have the tanks from that were used in the film. So it'd be
All right.
interesting to sort of put the music to that, I suppose. So okay, that's very sweet where you've got it from there. But looking at the album, then, which is your favourite track? It's always difficult, isn't it? Because it's a labour of love when you do something like this. It's like saying, which is your favourite child in front of them, isn't it?
That is exactly. I mean, and of course they are so different, because we have 3 songs which are very, very calm. We have The Village, we have After the Battle, and what's it called? Oh, so the name slips my name. Like recuperation or something. No, downtime. And I used the here's where much of the Basil Polidoris comes in, because I love his use of the English horn for the Conan soundtrack, when Conan has died and Valeria is trying to get him back by making a deal with the spirits, you know, stuff like that. So it's and also when she later on dies. So it's really, I love the sound of English horn. If I can pick one instrument, a favorite instrument in a symphony orchestra, that's an English horn, like without a single shadow of a doubt. I love it. I love the French horn as well. So the horns, but the English horn is a woodwind instrument, and it doesn't sound like a horn really, but it's really, So I used that for all those 3 songs, and I think out of those, I think maybe After the Battle, because that's I really tried to get the feeling of a squad that has seen action. They've been in battle, and if a squad is in battle, you have lost comrades almost all the time. At least when it comes to the kind of warfare that is my rather uneducated view of Twilight 2000. I mean, of course, if the US goes into some place, it's quite rare that they might lose a squad member when they make a strike. But when it's this other kind of, you know, battle, if you have a battle, it's quite often that you've lost someone or someone's lost a limb or something like that. So I really wanted a piece that, you know, can bring in the sorrow of losing one of your best friends, but also have the, phew, we made it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Have that, you know, that duality feeling of it, you know.
Yeah, it struck me as well, particularly with you saying it. It sort of reminded me. I don't think I mentioned it in the video. It reminded me a little bit of part of the soundtrack from Top Gun for the theme After Goose Has Died. There is that sort of similarity. Whether that was a conscious influence in you or an unconscious influence, I don't know. But it's a very good
No, it wasn't. But I have to go back and listen. I know the piece you're talking about, and I have to go back and listen to it again. Actually, yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it, how music can actually influence us without us actually even remembering it or knowing it. I think that's one of the powers of music, and the fact that it's also cross-cultural. You could play the same music to different cultures with no language in common and still get the same feeling.
Yeah. So that's a favorite, and of course the up-tempo ones like the Overture and the Time to Die, which is a battle song, and the Road to Krakow. They're all. I'm pretty happy with those. They turned out really well. I'm overall very happy with the soundtrack. I almost surprised myself with listening to it. I always do this. I'm finished with it. I give it to the publishers, and then I don't listen to it for a month, and then I go back to it and listen to it. And this time I was really surprised. Like, this is really good. Did I do this?
And it seems to have had fairly positive responses as well from the gaming community. I mean, there's been a couple I know negative, but I think,
Absolutely.
as you said, you never will satisfy everybody. Everybody had their own idea.
I never will please. I know that you weren't super pleased with the synthesizer ones, and that's totally fine. And that's why I had a lot of songs that did not have that. And because if I would have had a soundtrack where everything would have had a layer of synthesizers, then people who don't want that would be like discouraged. And then, but for those who feel like they want this Brad Friedel Terminator 1 feel for the soundtrack, they get their thing. And you'll never please everyone. So I'm just going to have to go with, of course, pleasing the publishers, because they're the ones ordering the soundtrack.
Well, they're the ones paying you, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, of course, doing something that I like myself, that I'm pleased with.
Well, no, I think that's been really interesting. It's nice to get a bit of the background to some of these, because most of the time you pick up an album, particularly the cinematic ones, and you don't find out the thoughts behind it. So it's been fascinating listening to some of your thoughts there. I've got to be honest, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you. I've got to be honest, I need to check out your podcast, which is Sweden Rolls, and I love the fact that you've got the mug that goes with that. And that was a nice idea. There you go, get your publicity in there. Oh, and I've just seen the picture on it of the dice for the headphones. That has style. I do like that one. That was a cute idea. And also your live stream Riddles in the Dark. No prizes for guessing where you got that title from.
Nope, no. It's the One Ring second edition live stream every Tuesday. So actually in 7 hours, I'll be live on Twitch.
Yeah, well, if you can send me a link to them, I'll put the link in the description to the video. And I've got to be honest, I will have to start listening in on that. All I need is it's a very appropriate one. Give me time.
This thing called time. Called time. What is that? Why can't we have more of it?
Well, it could be worse. I could be saying, "What have I got in my pockets?" But
yeah.
Very geek joke there, I'm afraid. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, Andreas, and hopefully we'll get this out, and we might bring a few more people into looking at your music, and at least
thank you so much,
and hopefully appreciating the thought that goes behind something like this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and I may say also that if a lot of my music is not out for public use as of now, but for patrons of Sweden Rolls, there is a shit ton of music on Patreon to download and use for your home game. So a bit of plugging there for. Yeah.
Feel
and you also get a lot of bloopers and bonus one-shots and all that stuff. So Sweden Rolls is a podcast which plays predominantly Swedish role-playing games. We also do a campaign of Baldur's Gate, the old computer game from the late 90s. We play that as an RPG because all of the players are professional actors. So they take on the roles of Minsk, Jahira, Imoen, Khalid, and so it's and play through the adventure. It's really a lot of fun.
That I can imagine being quite interesting. I'm gonna actually you're gonna have to get. I'm gonna have to get across there and have a look at some of those. So at least now I can say thank you for your time and effort, and good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Now we've gone past midday. It's a bit easier.
Yeah.